Welcome back to this edition of the Downline podcast, where we seek to help Christ followers faithfully walk with Jesus while pouring their lives into others. Joined again this week by Sarah Zylstra, who we talked previously with about kind of the history of social media and some of the dangers of it. Sarah, thanks for being back.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so I want to kind of do a part two based off our part one, and maybe we'll launch in with this. It would be easy for me to say, I think as a parent, well, sure, I'd love for my kid to get off his iPad because I want to talk to him more. And that's a real thing because we want to engage with our kids. But that is the tip of the proverbial iceberg as it relates to why we actually need to combat this. You know, there are deep theological and biblical reasonings, even for what it means to be human about this. So maybe can we start there in your perspective on that, and then we'll move into practical ways we can start fighting against this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Christian. I'm a Reformed Christian. So I believe God created. I am. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I believe God created the world and he created it good. And so I think one question that you can ask when you're looking at something like social media is what is this for? Like what need is this filling, or what is underneath this? And I think that God created us to be social, right? He created herds of elephants, flocks of birds, even tree roots are networked, right? Like we live in community with each other. Trinity, God communicates with himself. He communicates with us. We talk to each other. And so I think on its best day, social media is a way that people are drawn together, that they can iron sharpening iron be together, sometimes in ways they couldn't be before.
Sure.
If your kid has a rare disease and you connect with somebody else who's got that rare disease, what a gift for you. Or if you can connect with your missionary friends from across the world, what a gift for you. It can draw you into prayer when you find out bad news that's going on. It can draw you into worship when you find out good news that is going on. So I don't think you can just throw the whole thing in the garbage can. I think there is, if you're looking for it, good networking underneath there. But as sin entered the world, that affects everything. I think one thing that's important to say, Jamie, is that social media is not somehow neutral. It is not somehow sin-free. All of our technology, it kind of seems like it comes to us magically, like it just drops down and maybe it's just, a different category, but it's not. Social media was created by a person. We know who it was. His name is Mark. He was a little bit drunk, right? Like we know exactly how this got to us. And we know that it wasn't created somehow in a sin-free vacuum.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And honestly, even kind of getting to the why of why he did it was a fractured relational connection, right? Like it had its roots in something that was broken.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just, I think, important to remember, especially when you're letting your kids mess around with something like where did this come from? What is this trying to do? We talked a little bit last time about some of those old false promises that social media makes us for omniscience, right? Or maybe even for to know everything, to see everything, to be the one that people want to be like God. Those are false promises, but there is a million more sins. And we don't have time to go into all of them, but cyberbullying, which is so much easier to do online, looking at pornography, which is so much easier to do on social media, to lie to somebody, to be jealous, to be greedy, what you have is never enough, despising other people in your heart, not being a good steward of your time. All of those things are easier on social media.
Absolutely.
To do. Yeah.
Well, and two, I would add, there are a lot, but that whole temptation to think you can be omnipresent.
Yes.
Which then helps you actually never be fully present anywhere. And I did, and this is the least important thing we'll talk about, but even when I did my doctoral work out at Biola, I did it in Christian philosophy, but on the reality that a ministry of presence is the number one way to combat depression and anxiety. Because there's just that, again, that embodied reality of being present, which you cannot be if you're trying to be in 15 different places at once.
Yep, it's true. So the promise that it's making you is false, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's lying to you.
It's lying to you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. There's also some things that happen that are maybe not strictly speaking sinful, but that are worrisome to me. For girls, when I ask them, so when I've asked a lot of women what they don't like about social media, if they're older, if they're moms, or then their thing they hate about social media the most is the time suck. It just takes up so much of their time. If they're younger girls have all the time in the world. They're not worried about that. But what they tell me they hate about it is the comparison. They can't stop comparing themselves to other people.
Yeah.
I think this is not rooted in a bad thing. We're made to live in community. When I look at you and see how you're doing it and, oh, she's doing it like that, it's great. That's a better way to do it. Let's do it like that. Or, oh, she discovered this over here. Like, there are ways that you compare yourself to other people. Or like, oh, my kid is, how would you know if your child was behind in reading if you didn't have other kids to compare them to? So I don't think comparison itself is necessarily wrong, but I certainly think the level of comparison on social media, especially when you're not comparing yourself honestly to another person, right? You're just comparing yourself to a chosen and edited sliver of her life, which she is also doing back to you, a chosen and edited sliver of your life. And here's what I hate about that is like, when I just look at you and see your clothes and I don't see your heart, or I just look at what you posted about your weekend, but I don't see the fight you had with your parents or the way you failed that math test, then I'm comparing myself to the wrong angle of you. And when I do that, I kind of hate you and I kind of hate me, right? It is a breaking of, I kind of hate both of us at the end of that, because that was not a true comparison. And so now it's just a breaking of that relationship.
But I'll hate you while still liking your picture. And then when I see you, pretend like nothing's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though I'm feeling terrible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We can see this. I will rattle through this, but these are everywhere. In the last 10 years, self-poisonings among 10 to 12-year-old girls quadrupled. Hospital admissions for self-harm among 10 to 14-year-old girls went up. Major depressive episodes among 12 to 17-year-old girls increased 52%. Emergency room visits for suicidal ideation and attempts nearly doubled among children and adolescents. Suicide among 10 to 14-year-old girls doubled. In 2021, 1 out of every 3 high school girls seriously contemplated suicide. So this is literally killing our girls to be on this stuff.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you hear that and you go, all right, let's just get rid of all of it.
Yeah.
Right. Which is not a helpful solution because that's not reality. Right. Yeah. So how do we start? I mean, I don't even speak into this because my kids are still so little. You know, my oldest is 10, that we're still on the very front end. So we can maybe make some decisions. And I have a lot of compassion for parents that were just sort of, this got thrust into the midst of their children's adolescence almost out of nowhere without all the info you just quoted. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So where do we go? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. I think the first question you can ask yourself is just back this up a little bit and say, okay, what should my kid's social life, if this is supposed to be a social thing I'm aiming at, what should my kid's social life look like? And I think you can dream for your child a social life where he has a lot of, or she has a lot of good, deep friends. She runs around with other kids who share her faith, ironing, sharpening iron. After a while, she runs around to kids who don't share her faith and she shares Jesus with them. We want her friendships to glorify God. We want them to grow the fruit of the Spirit in her. We want those to be healthy relationships. We want her to have deep talks and a lot of laughing and having adventures together. We want her to know herself better by getting to know somebody else. We want her to know God better by getting to know other people. We want her to have friendships on foundations that are so solid that her friends show up at her high school graduation and her college graduation and her wedding and the baptism of her kids, right? We want for her good, deep, true friendships. So then the question that comes from there is, how do we get to those good, deep friendships? And I think the problem with social media, even beyond the things we've been talking about, is the opportunity cost. Because if she's looking at social media, that means, as you just mentioned, she's not present where she is. She's not with the friends that are around her or the people that are around her. Like every time that she's looking at her phone, and let me tell you what happens. She gets up in the morning, she checks her phone. She gets ready for school, she checks her phone. On the way to school, she's looking at her phone. In between classes, if she's lucky and they don't allow them in the classroom, she's looking at her phone. At lunchtime, she's looking at her phone. On the way home, she's looking at her phone. So a couple hours on the phone in the afternoon. So what's happening to her is, it might be 6 hours that she's on this phone, but it's really every hour she's awake. This thing is shaping her and she's thinking about her post or what to put, or could I tweet that? Or could I do that? Like she's thinking about it. It's discipling her whole life.
Well, obviously a downline. I love that you just use that word, because we are all being actively discipled by something, right? If we just take the Greek idea of being a follower and a learner, right? So what are we following and what are we learning? And these, kids or younger generation copying. Look, some of the most addicted social media people I know are grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just arguing with people or about politics on there or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So, okay.
Let's not just throw the girls under the bus. This is a problem definitely for all of us. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and boys, we have a way of using that stuff for like manipulative and nefarious reasons. We just kind of like to pretend like it doesn't bother us.
Yes. And I will say this as well. This is what I run across. So what I'm most worried about for boys is the access to pornography. There is porn all over social media. So put all the covenant eyes you want on your computer. But if he can open Instagram, then he has access to any porn person that is out there. Not only that, but he's also looking at the bodies of athletes or girls in his class or girls in his youth group. And this is what I'm going to say, because those girls who are online and they tell me they are dressing conservatively, they honestly think they are dressing. I believe it. They think they are dressing conservatively. And compared to their non-Christian friends, they are. But the girls on the beach with their bikini pictures or in their prom dress pictures or whatever it might be, those are just like, there's pictures everywhere. There's just pictures of girls in little clothes all over the internet.
Yeah.
That's my concern. Yeah.
Okay. So that gets at the vision for what we want for our kids, right?
Yeah.
The type of social life we want for our kids. But let's paint a hypothetical that I've got a 15-year-old daughter.
Okay.
I'm just becoming aware of the dangers of, and I feel pretty guilty that my wife and I, or husband and I, whatever, if it's a mom thinking this, that we've let it get this far and have no idea where to start, because you start to pull it back a little bit and the fangs come out, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So give us some help here.
Okay. So the first thing I would do is to pray like crazy. I would just pray all over this, because this is not outside of God's control. You do not have to do this by yourself, right? Like, you have the word of God, but you also have the Holy Spirit in you. Hopefully your daughter also loves the Lord. And so also there's the Holy Spirit in her. And so you are not by yourself. And so God is going to walk this with you. And so I would just pray a lot. If your children do not yet have social media, I would pray a lot before I opened up that account for them, or even before I got them a phone or whatever technological thing you're looking at. I missed that opportunity. I didn't pray before I got my social media accounts, because I was just like, what? I'm just signing up for this. What an opportunity that we missed, though, because your whole life should be submitted to God, right? We're living sacrifices here. We want everything to be under his control. So the first thing I would do is to pray a lot. And the second thing I would do is to talk to a lot of people. Talk to your parents, talk to the parents of the other kids in your class. If you see somebody who's like, oh, hey, they're doing this really well, certainly talk to them. Talk to your pastors, talk to your elders, your friends at church, your older friends, your younger friends. Talk to college kids. If there are college kids in your church, ask their opinion on things. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about, what decisions would you make if you could go back and reparent yourself for those years? I would just talk to a lot of different people about it. And then you're going to get more wisdom, or maybe see the mistakes that other people have made that you don't want to be making as well.
What's the risk of doing nothing?
Yeah. So I was speaking at an event in Philadelphia a couple months ago, and a mom came up to me afterward and she said, my daughter doesn't come out of her room anymore. She doesn't even come downstairs because she says it makes her anxious. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah, like being in her own kitchen or living room of her own home with her other family members made her so anxious that she didn't want to do it. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, it's like you were talking about, like this rewires your brain to a different normal. And if you are always in your room with the lights off and your earbuds on, right, like staring at a screen, then that's your normal. And anything that is higher level light or activity than that will make you anxious. I'm not going to say everybody's kid is going to end up like that, but that is a parent who didn't or couldn't somehow intervene earlier in a situation. Like that is we can just watch the kids around us. Like that is the loneliness is the end rate of this, and not being able to function. I'm reading a lot of Gen Z kids who are too scared to talk on the phone, too scared to order meals at a restaurant. They're pulling back from all of society. So I think that is where this goes. You can talk, I was going to mention too, like when you're talking, a lot of advice is talk to your kid about it. And 100% you should be talking to your kid about it. But as long as you can, you're their parent. They should not be making their own, they can maybe weigh in, but really they're not great parents, right? They're 15,
No.
so they're not going to make great decisions for themselves. And so you could ask her about things. One thing you could ask that would be fruitful is, tell me what you use this for. Do you primarily use this Instagram account to connect with your coach because that's where your coach puts all of the practice updates? Okay. Do you need to be on here 3 hours a day checking your stuff from your coach? Could we get the coach's information a different way, right? Are you on Facebook to send pictures to grandma once in a while? Is there a healthier or better way for us to do that? Could I text pictures to grandma once in a while where it's just me and grandma?
Yeah.
The more you can shrink her online footprint, the better off you're going to be.
And then, I have known a few parents, even back when we were living in Memphis, whose kids are older than mine, and they would resonate with like everything you just said, right? It's agree with the dangers. We've got to do this. It's whatever. But then nobody else is doing it with them.
Yeah.
So their kid, and my kids, we're in a different schooling environment out here in Texas in public school. We were in private Christian school in Memphis. And even in that community where you would almost assume, okay, we're all pretty like-minded on this, right? And you just realize, we're not. Like, we're still the minority, even in these environments. And so any ideas on how you actually build a committed community to not? It's easier when you're not the only one. And when your kid's not coming home saying, I have no idea what's going on at school because I'm the only one that isn't informed of any of this.
Yeah. I agree with you. It is hard to be the only one. And so if there are any other parents out there who are like-minded with you, to connect with them in any possible way is helpful. To find a school environment where they don't have their phones in the classroom all the time is really helpful as well. If it is within your means to do so, if you can get them into a school environment that has less technology, that is always going to be your best bet for your education, much less for all of your social relationships as well. There are parents out there, I know them, who are the only kids in their class who aren't on social media or don't have a phone. My son is in that position right now. He is in a little small classical school, and he is the only one at this point who does not have a phone in his class. That's a choice that we're making for him. And here's what I think my end goal is, Jamie. I haven't said this to anybody else yet, but this is what I think it is, because I watched this with my older son. My older son barely played any video games. And then when he went to college, we thought, oh no, he's going to play all the video games and go off the rails and be like a zombie. But he didn't. And why he didn't, he told us, is he said, I'm not good at any of them. And so then it's boring for me. So we have effectively wrecked him for video games, because who wants to play with a kid who can't play very good?
Right.
You know, that's so then he just does something else instead. He goes outside or works or does his homework.
Yeah.
So my younger son too, we have been so strict with him about his phone, because we made some mistakes with my older son. So we're correcting them on this. So we're pretty strong about it. One thing that has helped us is very firm boundaries. We have not said, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know. Like, we have just said, like, prayed about it. His dad and my husband talked about it. And then we said, this is what it's going to be. And we were pretty, like, they'll knock against your boundaries a little bit, but then when they can't move, they'll stop. So the less you wobble, the better off that's going to be. So clarity for him. But then also, as he gets older, he can see in other kids around him what he doesn't want to be. He can see in them, oh, they're looking at their phone all the time. They're no fun to be with. I don't want to be someone who's no fun to be with, right? Or he can see, like, oh, they're just looking at dumb stuff. It's just, and trust me, kids who are 14 are not looking at smart stuff. They're just looking at dumb memes. There's nothing you're missing.
Right.
And so then after a while, they can recognize that. I do think it's harder for girls because there's that social aspect. But I think if you can replace, like as you're pulling back from social media, if you can replace that with food that is good, right? So pull back on the snacks and fill in with, take her to a concert, take her to a ball game, have her friends come over and they all put their phones in a basket and they do their hair together and she makes cookies with somebody. Like, you for a while are going to have to almost reteach her how to play, how to be with people, how to interact with people. And it doesn't have to be cold turkey. So even if you're like, hey, for half an hour on a Saturday morning, we're going to make cookies together, and then you can look at your phone again. And then we're going to do it for 35 minutes. Then we're going to do it for an hour. And we are just like slowly walking back this thing that you have walked into. And as we do it, I am filling in with other activities that are so much more fun and so much more life-giving that you want to keep doing them. Now, hear this. This is going to cost you some money.
Yep.
And it's going to cost you some time and it's going to cost you some effort, because ransoming your child back from social media is not free. But it is worth it. It is worth it.
Well, I love the term you just moved. Yeah, ransoming them back, because there's a cost. And there's going to be an emotional cost too. Like they're not going to like you for a little bit. When you said that, it reminded me of that old, I think it's Thomas Chalmers sermon, The Expulsive Power of a New Affection, where it's the idea of you don't just try to remove something that steals your affections, you fill it. It's what, the late Tim Keller always said, is Christianity isn't about emptying your mind. It's about filling it with something 100%. Else. Mm-hmm. And that was a great point you just made, is we can't just take things away, fill it with a, more beautiful alternative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so parents, your kids, and, I know my kids, and it is hard. And it's easier for me to tell my kids right now, y'all go play Super Smash on the Switch, and sometimes that's fun and they play together and they bond but there's temptation in me, even of like, the house is totally chaotic. I know one way to keep it quiet. Just so I feel, I don't want anybody listening to think I feel all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Sarah, any last thoughts or comments or final words you want to say on this topic before we close down the day?
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple things. I'd say three things. One is accountability is a gift that we give to our kids. Studies show that the blue light that comes from the screen that keeps you awake keeps younger brains awake even more. The emotions that you feel when you read something online, they feel stronger. You know this, right? You were in junior high when you got like super mad because one little weird thing went wrong, right? Yes. Yeah. So they're more vulnerable than you, not less. So if you're feeling something or you're noticing something, like they're feeling that so much harder. So our guardrails for them should be stronger, not less strong than the ones that we have for ourselves.
That's good.
Another thing is social media is not done changing, so you can't be either. I wish this was a one and done thing, but as social media changes, which it is constantly iterating to try and grab our kids even more, we too then have to be constantly iterating and staying up with like what's the next thing that's coming at us. You're not alone. There are people out there who are doing the research and the studies. So it's not like you have to invent this. You just have to I'd read, Jonathan Haidt has lots of good stuff on this. Jean Twenge, who wrote, iGen, also has a lot of good stuff on this. Okay. I haven't heard of that author. Yeah. She wrote iGen. She works with Haidt a lot. She's done a huge amount of studies on this. And then I would just end with grace. Like, God is sovereign over this. This social media does not surprise God. There are beautiful stories of ways he has used it for good. God uses even our mistakes and our mess ups for his glory. And so there is nothing that you have done there's no sin that you have committed or parenting mistake that you have made that is not covered. There's nowhere that you can go or that your child can go that God is not walking with them, and we're working things for their good as well. And so just remember, as you labor in this space, God is with you, and he's doing stuff that you can't even imagine yet.
And I would say, just to let you have one more thought, is you would agree, like this is not something though that we can be indifferent towards.
I agree. I think we just have seen in our society where indifference gets us, and it's increasingly terrible. Like every study seems worse.
Well, hey, thanks again. I know you're busy and appreciate your time.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.